On the 26th of December 1900, a relief boat fought its way through heavy seas to a lighthouse on the very edge of the Atlantic. No flag flew over it. No boxes had been set out for collection. And when a keeper finally climbed the rock and opened the door, he found the beds unmade, the clock stopped, and one set of oilskins still hanging on its peg. But there was no one inside, and there was no one on the island. 3 men had simply vanished, and more than a century later, no one can tell you for certain what happened to them. The Flannan Isles are a scatter of bare green rocks in the Outer Hebrides, about 20 miles off the west coast of the Isle of Lewis in Scotland. For centuries, they were home only to seabirds and the occasional shepherd. Sailors called the largest of them Eilean Mor, the Big Isle. In 1899, engineers finished a lighthouse near its summit, hauling every stone up 150 feet of sheer cliff. It was first lit that December. For a year, its lamp burned without trouble, a single point of light at the edge of the open sea. The light was run by 4 men who rotated, 3 on the rock at a time, while the 4th rested ashore. That December, the 3 on duty were James Duckett, the principal keeper, a father of 4, Thomas Marshall, his second assistant, and Donald MacArthur, a local man, a veteran sailor, brought in to fill a gap. If quiet, unsolved cases like this are your kind of story, this is the channel for them. Consider subscribing. Because what happened to these 3 men has never been settled, only argued over. The first sign that something was wrong came not from the island, but from a passing ship. On the 15th of December, a steamer called the Arctur, bound for Leith, noted in her log that the Flannan light was dark, invisible in the poor weather, exactly when it should have been blazing. The message took days to reach the Northern Lighthouse Board, and by the time anyone could act, a storm had closed the sea around the islands, holding the relief boat in harbour for nearly a week. At last, on Boxing Day, the lighthouse tender Hesperus reached Eilean Mor. Her captain, Jim Harvey, expected the usual welcome: a flag raised, supply boxes waiting, a keeper on the landing. There was nothing. He sounded the ship's whistle. He fired a flare. The island gave back only the noise of the sea. A small boat was lowered, and the relief keeper, Joseph Moore, was rowed in alone to climb the long stairway to the light. Moore found the entrance gate closed and the main door shut. Inside, the rooms were tidy and empty. The beds were unmade. The clock had stopped, its weights run all the way down. The kitchen utensils were clean. The lamps had been cleaned and refilled, ready for use. The routine work of the light, all finished. And by the door hung a single set of oilskins, the heavy waterproofs a keeper would wear against winter weather. 2 sets were gone. 1 remained. Whoever left it behind had walked out without it. Shaken, Moore returned to the Hesperus, and Captain Harvey sent a telegram that the board would never forget. "A dreadful accident has happened at the Flannans," it read. "The 3 keepers have disappeared from the island." The clocks were stopped, and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs, or drowned trying to secure a crane. It was a guess, and for the moment, it was all anyone had. The men left behind to mind the light searched every corner of the island, and they noticed something strange. The island had 2 landing places. At the east landing, everything was as it should be, calm, untouched, ordinary. But the west landing, the one that faced the open Atlantic, told a completely different story. There, the sea had been at work, and the damage was almost beyond belief. A wooden box that held the mooring ropes had been lashed into a crevice in the rock 110 feet above the waterline. It had been smashed open, its contents scattered. Iron railings were bent flat. A section of iron railway had been torn clean out of its concrete. A boulder weighing more than a ton had been shifted. And at the cliff top, more than 200 feet above the sea, the turf itself had been ripped away, as though a wave had reached up and clawed at the grass. The investigator who saw it said the damage was hard to believe unless you stood there yourself. That investigator was Robert Muirhead, a superintendent of the Lighthouse Board, and the very man who had hired all 3 of the missing keepers years before. He knew them. Now he walked their island, reading it like a page. He studied the clothes left behind. He measured the damage, and slowly, he assembled the most careful account anyone has ever given of that day. Muirhead concluded that the men had worked normally until dinner on Saturday the 15th. Then two of them, he believed Duckett and Marshall, had pulled on their oilskins and gone down to the West Landing to secure that box of ropes against the rising sea. What he thought happened next was simple and terrible. An unusually large wave, one of those that rears up without warning on an exposed coast, rushed up the face of the rock, rose above the men, and came down with enormous force, sweeping them off the cliff and into the water. The third keeper, likely MacArthur, the one who had gone out without his oilskins, may have run down to warn them and been taken too. And there the story might have rested, a tragedy of the sea. But a mystery this clean rarely stays clean. Over the years, a far stranger version took hold. People spoke of a secret logbook, in which the keepers had supposedly recorded their final days. Terrible storms no one else had seen, one keeper weeping, all three praying, and a last calm line: God is over all. It is a haunting tale. It is also completely invented. No such log ever existed. A later writer simply made it up. And the real records show no storm at all in those waters on the days the keepers were said to be praying for their lives. Other details came from poetry, not police work. In 1912, a writer named Wilfred Gibson published a ballad about the island, imagining the rescuers finding a meal laid out and a chair overturned, as if the men had leapt up mid-supper and fled. It is a beautiful image. But Joseph Moore, the man who was actually there, said the very opposite. The kitchen was clean and tidy, the work all finished. The overturned chair was never real. It was the mystery growing a legend around itself. Strip the legends away, and what remains is quieter and somehow heavier. Three experienced men, a wrecked landing, a coat left on a peg, and a sea violent enough to smash a rope box 110 feet up, shift a 1-ton boulder, and tear the turf from the cliff top. The strongest explanation is also the simplest one, that the ocean took them while they did their job. And yet a few questions never close. Why was the gate latched and the door shut if men had rushed out in panic? Why had the clock been allowed to stop? No body was ever found. No final note was ever written. The lamp was relit. The island went on. But the three keepers of the Flannan Isles never came back. And the last thing they truly left behind was a silence we are still trying to read.